I have the great privilege to be with Allie today from Waggle, and I'd love, Allie, for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little about what you folks do, and we can dive into the conversation a little bit.
Thank you, and thank you, Sai, so much for inviting me to speak. And it's been such a, I was saying, I'm so thrilled to get to actually meet you. I've just discovered this whole term anti-fragility probably less than a month ago, and it's become my mantra for pretty much everything. So it's wonderful to have a chance to talk more. And I am a content strategist at Waggle, which essentially means I just write and write and write. And the beautiful thing about it is I get to do constant research. So reading news, articles, podcasts, listening to podcasts, and constantly, trying to understand what it is right now that's the most important thing happening in the world. And from a work perspective, how can Waggle help with that? And essentially what our company Waggle does is our main, what we do is we tap into what we call employee voice, which is the voice of an organization. It's the DNA, the heartbeat of an organization. It's all the firsthand insights, the wisdom, the expertise, the full spectrum of every individual coming together. And we provide a platform, a technology platform, to allow organizations, whether across the whole enterprise or just within a smaller divisions, to pose questions, but they're open-ended questions. So we're not, it's often we can be compared to a survey, but it's not answering designated questions with like a scale of 1 to 10 or I strongly disagree. Instead, it's an open-ended question. So there's an element of courage and vulnerability, and typically the first kind of questions would be around, what is one thing that we're doing well, or what is the one thing that we need to improve, and then you get this whole like collective intelligence rising to the top, and every response is anonymous, but it's transparent, so everyone can see everyone's responses, and then you can vote. So you may have 60,000 people answering and then multiple votings, but you'll see the top 5 that have kind of distilled up to the top. So the essence of what we're trying to do is really help organizations have a dynamic, live, transparent conversation.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much, Allie. And definitely, finding you through your writing around anti-fragility and what have you, and kind of getting into this conversation. Of course, we're all in this crisis together, and the narrative and the themes that we've been talking about. And I love a couple key words, especially that you just mentioned, amongst others. Courage and vulnerability is one thing that's crucial for an anti-fragile perspective and anti-fragility. Love to kind of hear your thoughts and vantage point relative to anti-fragility, what you're seeing, tying in some of the concepts that you've already mentioned.
Well, I mean, I guess one of the most profound examples of courage and vulnerability that I am seeing right now is within, the two things are our healthcare providers, our front lines with this global pandemic, and our Black community. They're both are incredible models of anti-fragility, and particularly because they have, I guess I shouldn't keep them too close together because I want to make sure they're two very, very distinct, heroic examples of anti-fragility. But the courage and the vulnerability is being able to maintain an open mind, an open heart, and do your most, your best work that you really, really care about, while also recognizing that we don't have all of the answers. And in the case of healthcare, particularly with the pandemic, these front lines did not have all the answers. And at the same time, they were doing their most meaningful work, what they were put on this planet, what they've been trained extensively to do. So having the ability to let yourself be in a situation that, with a case of healthcare, like acute stress, but being able to continue and recognizing that adversity, recognizing, all of the unknowns are just going to stay there, and still jumping in and continuing forward, and not just building resilience in that way, but like moving through that process. I can't even imagine the level of just profound sources of strength they had to tap into, and to be able to, there's going to be years of recovery and kind of wellness that we're going to need to make sure that we support the whole healthcare community around now. And then in terms of the our Black community, you know, the way that, well, for their vulnerability, they have been vulnerable to social injustice, oppression, inequality for centuries, since they've come to America, since they were brought to, you know, taken and brought to America. So, but they've persevered. And what we're seeing now in these protests, or personally myself, is they've been rioting or protesting. They have tried to use their voice. They have tried to speak up. They have tried to fight this oppression for centuries. And that takes incredible courage, given the level of vulnerability they are, and they aren't, unfortunately, tragically, not always protected the way that our systems and all our Constitution are intended to protect them. So I think those are, you know, just their ability to continue and to stay peaceful for the most part. You know, like, I have incredible respect and the level of dignity and power and force that they've been able to continue to have with this kind, open, loving, as a culture, this like faith-based, you know, I'm generalizing, but this is what I'm seeing now. So I think now more than ever as humans, I think we've all been made far more vulnerable with this pandemic. And I feel like that was an incredible primer for us now to really, you know, we've had to recognize our humanity through this pandemic with, you know, being home with loved ones, some ideally, hopefully all healthy, and in some cases tragically ill. But I feel like that's forced us to really come into our kind of kinder, more human side, so that we're ready to have that same humanity in protecting and having solidarity for the Black Lives Matter movement and all people of color.
Allie, your expression is very eloquent, because there's a few things that you're really calling out. One is, in particular, as we face adversity, it's really allowing us to manifest our humanity as well, and it's bringing that back to the surface. And one of the statements or one of the phrases that you use in your blog is that anti-fragility also goes beyond finding a new normal. So the concepts are very, very intertwined, and anti-fragility isn't about simply being harsh or being stressful, but rather really rediscovering in many ways our humanity to overcome some of the adversity. And I would love for you to comment on that, or kind of share your thoughts as you were writing this, as you're expressing it.
Sure. Well, and one of the women that I quote in the blog too is a woman who, she's African American. She was homeless. She's a recovered addict. And she says the quote, how she kind of moved, and she's now the founder of a venture capital firm that supports underrepresented minorities. And she refers to bend so you don't break. So that kind of, you know, there's like strong, we think of strong as like rigid and strong and, you know, fortified and hard. But actually, I think right now, what I'm perceiving anti-fragility is meaning, if we're going to evolve, we actually have to soften. We have to soften, slow down, pause, breathe, and operate from less of a force of, you know, physical and, I mean, I'd actually would say like ego-driven force in some ways, to more of a heartfelt power and force. And bending is like that vulnerability, like bending where, in the case of both the pandemic and now with this Black Lives Matter beautiful revolution or movement, is we have to recognize that a lot, the need to listen and learn, and we don't have the answers. We're not going to have all the answers. We need each other to teach us, to grow, and we have to be, you know, collectively, we are stronger as a whole than as an individual. But yeah, I think that whole concept of resilience, it's not a let's bounce back and get back to
Mhm.
where we were. And God wasn't that nice when we thought we had control. Well, now we don't. No, we no longer have that misunderstanding.
Mhm.
and but going through this whole process is creating our opportunity to evolve into a more sustainable human race through kindness, through this recognition of we lead with our heart. So I don't know if that
Yeah.
answered your question.
Definitely, definitely. It's very powerful because it's not simply bouncing back or adapting or to where we were, but it's truly evolving, going further than that. And it's also when I really, really appreciated the blog because it isn't simply looking at adversity as a negative, but it's an opportunity with humanity to grow beyond and evolve beyond that. So no, I appreciate I appreciate the elaboration completely, and the blog likewise. Any thoughts on what I said at all? I've got one more sort of question or thought I'd love your input on, but any thoughts or response to what I shared?
Around anti-fragility and resilience.
And resilience and definitely evolving beyond adapting, if you will.
Yeah, like the way I see it is now, if we are recognizing anti-fragility as the goal,
Hmm.
not resilience, we're not trying to bounce back, we're not trying to create the new normal. There's no normal. Like, let's
Yeah.
not consider normal as even a phrase anymore without, some element of humor, because God, like, I think we've all
Yes.
been, you know, rung around, and like, there's no question that the normal is now kind of almost a funny word. But the new normal is a better normal. It's not a
Yeah.
normal. It's a recognition of this constant flux, constant uncertainty, that is no longer something that we want to use all of our energy and our focus and our resources in trying to prevent or somehow stop. It's more harness and acknowledge, and actually, um, because we have no other choice, celebrate it as a
Well
new
said.
mode of operating in everything that we do. Recognize we're all at a different starting point, but we're all working from an element of, we don't know what's going to happen. What is the most important thing we can do right now? Then what can I do? What's the most important thing at this moment? Whether it's, having a conversation with my daughter and apologizing for,
Yeah.
like, telling her to be quiet.
Yeah.
I'm on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
phone. Just baby steps, but all of those things are if we all start to just work on our own, in our own sandbox, and work really hard to do the right thing, whether how big and small it is, then together we're going to be moving forward into this much, much stronger foundation. That's again, a fluid foundation.
Yeah.
It's the bend, don't break kind of foundation.
Very well said. Very well said. And kind of the last piece I really want to mention, which I thought was again very powerful, is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Any thoughts? Any thoughts on kind of what ran through your mind when you wrote that? I'm sure the phrase, of course, stands out as you captured it.
That is probably the most perfect summation. And I quoted my friend who I work with, Gina Martinez, and she wrote, and it's in the blog. It links to it from the blog. But Gina wrote our company a beautiful letter probably few days after the protests started, and to the whole company on inequality and injustice. And essentially what she was saying is, if you want to help right now, I think the most important way is to start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And and that, to me, is the essence of life.
Hmm.
Now, if we're looking at life from the lens of anti-fragility, um, and the and from a waggle perspective, that's what we're always, authentic conversation. That's the essence of what we do. We allow people to start a dialogue around topics that matter. And that's where the vulnerability and the courage comes from, in asking those open-ended questions, whether you're a senior executive, or manager, any individual level within the organization, is having an authentic conversation. So right now we are all having so many starting new conversations that we've never had before, and we
Hmm.
don't have the practice. Particularly me as a white woman, I don't have the practice and the life of the life of experience that enables me to have put myself in other people's shoes for people of color. And so, but we want to help. We have the best intentions. We have this passion, this energy that I'm, now focusing on trying to, because I feel like that's the evolution of humanity more so than ever. Let's deal with inequality and injustice. So having those authentic conversations means also being willing to make a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be, we're worried about saying the wrong thing, or primarily saying the wrong thing, and maybe not having the respect that we're trying to convey. I feel now that level of discomfort is far more important to address than simply not starting the conversation. The damage is so much greater when we think in terms of voice versus silence. And in conclusion to that is the amount of hope and inspiration that these conversations bring. If we take that first step and just ask an open-ended question from the very beginning, let ourselves all be students.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many teachers, which is one of the beautiful things about studying anti-fragility. I was like, oh my God, there's already so many people, so many wise people that we can reach out to and draw from and learn from.
And really learn together, quite honestly, in the same way. And I really appreciate how you're expressing it in terms of not shying away from asking the questions, but really ask the questions and be ready to embrace the answers and grow and evolve from the answers. Not shy away from the difficult conversations, but truly step into that. Almost in a sense, stress ourselves, step into the stress, if you will, so we can evolve from it, not shy away from it.
Exactly. And even if it's a conversation with ourselves, like
Yes.
the very first step is the self-awareness. Like, ask ourselves an open-ended question. Try not to argue with yourself too much.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Compassion. Let's listen compassionately with kind ears, but absolutely, like, asking ourselves those questions so that we're really kind of grounding ourselves and understanding what do we know and what do we need to learn?
Yes. Very well said. Any other closing thoughts, Ali? Otherwise, I really want to thank you for your time and tremendous opportunity on my part, quite honestly, to find you and reach out to you and be able to have a conversation. I hope you'll keep us in the loop as the journey continues. But any closing thoughts at all, Ali?
Well, firstly, thank you so much again, Sai, for inviting me here. And yeah, I'd like to close in just saying, if there's one thing I am learning over the last few months, it is that learning is the journey. Opening up asking the questions, opening up our minds, sharing our voice is, and listening to all those outside that are sharing their voices right now. It breaks through all that paralysis. Like, I feel this, we want to keep this momentum going. Like, what have been absolute tragedies in the face of this pandemic and the George Floyds and absolute horrific tragedies and pain and grief that we are suffering if we look at it from a lens of anti-fragility, these are the things that we will, if approached with in honoring that grief and honoring the pain and honoring our ability to ask those questions to figure out how we can help. And then even on a just level of an organizational standpoint, like, as organizations, what can we do right now? What is the most important thing you need to know about moving forward with this world with the pandemic? It's continuing, leading from crisis to recovery. And in this world now where our with social justice and equality, how can every organization get involved? Asking the questions, and it's astounding what we are seeing rise up and providing us with those answers. So it's actually very inspiring and motivating. And I guess it's Darwinism, that's how we evolve, because it keeps us going and it keeps guiding us in the right direction.
Very well said. Very well said. And that's I think a great note. Exactly. We continue to evolve by going through the turbulence that we're going through, and we need to seize the opportunity to really embrace that evolution in such a way that it's for lack of any other word, it's a win-win for all involved. So definitively. Thank you so much, Ali.
Yeah.
Tremendously appreciate the opportunity to be with you. And by all means, I think the great work that you folks do is needed and welcomed by the world at large. So thank you, Ali.
Thank you so much, Sai. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.
All right, take
Likewise.
care.
Thank you. Take care.